Well, this is definitely one of those cases where I didn't realize that I really needed a karaoke version of a lot of Steven Wilson songs, but now that we have it, man, I am pumped. The soundtrack to The Last Day of June by Steven Wilson. So, The Last Day of June was actually a video game that was developed by Ovosonico and published by 505 Games, and it was released earlier this year, I believe in August. With the soundtrack, it is literally a soundtrack to the video game. It's purely instrumental, and it's all pre-recorded sound bites from Steven Wilson, and I believe Steven Wilson actually did some of the mixing on this as well. And as we've known from Steven Wilson, this is kind of like a lifelong ambition for him to score a film or a piece of art, and I guess this is as closest as he's gotten so far. I mean, Dead Wing was a soundtrack to a fictional movie that he was trying to write, and so this I think is like the closest that we've gotten, and it definitely feels like a soundtrack. Now, there's no real new music on this. It's all from his solo works from Insurgentes, or as I like to call it, Insurgents, Grace for Drowning, The Raven That Refused to Sing, as well as Hand Cannot Erase. And a lot of the actual songs on here are a lot of the darker songs, a lot of the colder tracks, a lot more of the intimate stuff. Like it's the things that you would think, oh, this kind of sounds like it could fit on a soundtrack. Well, these are the songs that we have found on here, and they're purely instrumental takes on this. And I think like the most powerhouse moment is the title track of The Last Day in June, which is just a reimagining of Routine. It's the entire thing of Routine, but slightly changed just here and there. It's one of those albums that I can't really talk too much about because I've already kind of talked about them already in like past album reviews of his. And one of the things that I actually will praise about this album is it could be considered like a compilation album in some respects, but because it's a reimagining of a lot of these songs in a purely instrumental form, it feels new. It feels like its own thing, and it really feels like a soundtrack. Like, I love scores and soundtracks, so this fits right into my little playing styles. Like, I'm just, I'm really digging this. I'm really getting into it. And actually, it's a very good winter album as well. Like, it's very cold, it's very dark, it's very ambient sound kind of thing. And I believe there's actually a track from his ambient electric project of Bass Communion. I always read it as Bass Communion, but it's Bass Communion. And I believe that's the second or third track off of this album. And so what I really liked is listening to each of the songs and be like, okay, so that's that song, okay, so that's that song. And I'm pretty sure I get the same feeling if I were actually to play the video game as well. So overall, this is a great treat for those Steven Wilson fans. It's definitely streets ahead of To the Bone. Like, let's just forget that happened this year, and let's say, like, this was the real release from Steven Wilson this year. Because it really feels like it. Like, it really feels like that Steven Wilson identity that we've had from his first, 4 solo projects. So I really enjoy it. Now, it's a harder album to really rate because it's not really covering any new ground. It's not really doing anything all that new, even though it's the older work reimagined. So in that kind of like I've been loving this, and I guess the overall rating for this album is still, I love it with my whole heart. Like, this is the kind of album that I'm going to listen to when I'm having a hard time drifting off to sleep. This is going to be like a study or a reading kind of an album. This is very much that soundtrack that I love to put on as background music, as well as music that I love just to kind of sink into and float away with. So it's got that multi-purposed aspect to that. Now, if you're not a fan of Steven Wilson, or you've never really heard of any of his works before, this isn't a good entry point, because this is the kind of music that you are already familiar with and you want to hear it reimagined, right? So definitely check out the source material first before checking this guy out, only because it will help you appreciate where the music is coming from. So that's about it from me. As I said, not a whole lot to talk about of this album, just outside of the fact that it's a really great kind of addition to his overall discography, and I think it really places itself nicely. Like, I like this a lot better than the Brief Encounter with Steven Wilson, or that like best of that he put out a couple of years ago, because I'm not a big fan of compilation albums. I much rather prefer like a live album or something like this, where it's a reimagining of past works. So that's about it from me. Really digging it. Check it out if you're a Steven Wilson fan, and if you're not, well, check out some of his other albums, because they're a good time as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching once again. I'm just doing a little bit of an end card here. It's December, which means I've got a notes review community survey going on. I've left that link down below, so go fill that out. It's a census. It's just to let me know a little bit more about yourself. I've got a couple fun links there for other videos to check out as well as to subscribe, so definitely check those out, as well as some social media things down below. Thank you guys once again. Notes out.